Welcome back to Money Media. James here, and today we're going to have a little bit of a light-hearted discussion about renters and landlords. Stick around. I'm seeing a lot of hate and a lot of anger amongst Australians, and I believe it's misguided, specifically in the housing market and the shambles that the current Australian housing market is in. And so I wanted to create this public service announcement just to remind people that the issue with our housing may not necessarily be with the people that most Australians are blaming. So the motivation for this video, I was reading through some news articles covering renters and their opinions of landlords. And I was seeing examples given of renters who are not maintaining properties properly. They're not mowing lawns, they're not cleaning the property, they're not making sure the property is neat and tidy and presentable, and everything that happens with a property, with its upkeep and its maintenance, that a renter should be responsible for. And I read a little bit further into some of these stories, and I also saw examples and articles about landlords and of landlords who were becoming increasingly frustrated with renters not keeping their properties maintained, and their response to that was were negative ones, such as not having appliances or fixtures and fittings, etc., replaced or repaired in a timely manner for renters. Things like gates, outdoor gates may be coming off their hinges, especially in a time where we're seeing an upward trend in crime in certain areas around the country, given the economy. And as a form of backlash, landlords are starting to abuse some of their powers by not maintaining their properties how they should be, how an investor should maintain an asset. And so I just wanted to create this video to explain a little bit about supply and demand, how it affects the housing market in Australia, and why we are in the situation we're in. So I guess first and foremost, the supply and demand side. So the issue with our housing in Australia is an issue of supply and demand. So it's not the landlord's fault that rent is high, and I'll tell you why that is. It's because the landlord is setting the rents at the market rate, the market value, and the market dictates that value. So if every house in a particular suburb was $500 per week, and an investor bought into one random house in that suburb and decided, you know what, I'm going to increase the rent for this house, I'm going to charge $600 per week. Now, assuming that there was enough housing for everybody, the landlord wouldn't be able to achieve $600 per week for rent, because all the other tenants would say, no thanks, I'm fine where we are. And those coming in to that suburb would find another house at $500. Obviously, the housing market is tight, and so we are seeing some increases, although the trend is backing off significantly, but we are seeing some increases in rents because of supply and demand. And so that can occur, but it comes to a point where rent becomes so high that the tenants won't live in that suburb. They'll pick another suburb. And then if that next suburb, the rentals continue to increase, they'll move to another suburb, and so on and so forth. And so it's not actually the landlord setting those particular rates. It's the market setting those rates through the mechanism of supply and demand. And so there's supply and demand, and there's also another major contributing factor, which we've covered a video about this, and Camille will chuck a link to the video in the description. It was a very popular video, actually, discussing some of the macroeconomic factors in housing and why we're currently at where we're at in Australia. But a lot of our structural changes, a lot of our value locked up in property, and the reason why values are continuing to increase in Australia in property is because the structural change, the structural setup pertaining to the policy, our Australian housing policy, and the policy is set by the policy makers of Australia, those lovely men and women who sit in Canberra and discuss our policies, our laws, etc., day in, day out. So one of the major issues, aside from supply and demand in Australia with our housing market, is also our policy and how our policy is set up. And it is set up for long-term investment in real estate and not necessarily set up to reward renters. Both of those things are controlled by the same group of people. And that group of people is not renters and it's not landlords. So I just want to shout out to renters and shout out to landlords. Renters, if you're living in a home, if you are lucky enough to call a place home, even if it's not your own, even if you don't own it, in Australia, if you're fortunate enough, please take care of it. It's somebody else's thing that they have worked hard, most likely, to purchase. And so just like you would treat somebody's car in the car yard with respect and you wouldn't key it, please treat the house that you're living in with respect. And landlords, if you've got an asset, you need to maintain it, especially if somebody's living in it. Make sure it's an acceptable living standard. If something breaks, fix it. If you can't afford to fix it, sell it. That means you can't afford the asset. So that wraps this video up, guys. I just thought it was really important to make a bit of an announcement to Australians and to anyone else around the world who's seeing similar issues. I know in England as well, they're seeing similar housing and structural issues. Be kind, guys, because a lot of the time the source of the problem is not the people that you're pointing the finger at. Take care, and I hope to see you in the next video.